We're closing in on Joe Biden's 100th day in office, a symbolic threshold that signals the end of what's often the most productive period of a presidential term. And a couple hours from now, before a joint session of Congress, the president will likely celebrate what he's been able to get done so far and lay out a vision for the next 100 days and beyond. But the window of possibility for the Biden agenda will close quickly. It's often the case that the president's party loses seats in midterm elections, but it's especially likely this time around with congressional redistricting based on the 2020 census. After months of delays, the Census Bureau released its latest report this week, which will trigger additional congressional districts in Texas, Colorado, Florida, Montana, North Carolina, and Oregon, most of which went for Trump in the last election, while California, Illinois, Michigan, New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia, many of which went for Biden, will lose seats. But my next guest's sense of urgency is not about election dates. In a recent speech reintroducing the Green New Deal with co-sponsor Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a resolution of climate goals and priorities, Senator Ed Markey called on President Biden to take bold action.
We believe that this is the moment that requires us to act big, think big, have a program that matches the magnitude of the problem that we're confronted with, and to do so with justice.
Senator Ed Markey joins me now. Senator, it's good to see you. Thanks so much for your time.
No, of course. I always love being with you.
So I know you believe that the president's infrastructure plan is a good first step, a multi-trillion-dollar first step. But I also believe that you and Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez have said it's not big enough. To quote, I think it's Voltaire and maybe Obama, are you not letting the perfect be the enemy of the good, Senator?
What my goal is and what the Green New Deal was all about was to match, again, the moment to the magnitude of the problem. We're faced with a climate crisis. We have a chance to create millions of new jobs, and we have to make sure that we take this opportunity in the first year of the Biden administration in order to accomplish that goal. No question, the Biden infrastructure proposal was big. No question, his promise at the summit that he had with other world leaders that the United States would have a 50 to 52% reduction in greenhouse gases by the year 2030. Now it's imperative for the United States to make sure that any bill we passes muster, that it in fact does meet those very high goals that have been set for our country.
You know, I don't want to belabor it, but since you mentioned the cutting the emissions by 50% by the end of the decade, I only want to spend a second on this. But when you hear people like the Texas governor, like Congressman Boebert from Colorado, like Fox News, talk about how your Green New Deal would limit the amount of red meat every American could eat to 4 pounds a year, is your reaction that they're intentionally disingenuous or just have no idea what is going on?
Well, it can be both at the same time. The reality is that they made that charge on Fox News, right-wing Republicans, oil and gas state Republicans back in 2009, February, when AOC and I introduced the Green New Deal. So what we did was, the next week was we went out to get an ice cream and we ate it together and put out our picture. And obviously you can't love ice cream and not love cows at the same time. So we clearly aren't attempting to ban cows. And all of this misinformation, we absolutely need an aquarium for all of the red herrings that the Republicans and Fox News puts out there.
But I'm bummed, thank you, yes.
But the bottom line is that we're going to create 4 to 8 million new jobs with the Green New Deal and with the Biden plan, if we can just make it big enough. And I think at the end of the day, that's going to lead to the Democrats holding on the House and Senate in 2022 and Joe Biden getting reelected overwhelmingly in 2024. But again, it's 1933 that we're living in right now. It's 1918 for this pandemic. And we have to respond to this challenge, and we can do it. And I'm very optimistic that notwithstanding the well-paid spokespeople for the oil and gas industry, that we're going to be able to pass, even using reconciliation, a very robust, big, bold infrastructure program.
I want to get back to reconciliation, meaning 50 votes plus one in a minute. You also wrote an op-ed in the Globe yesterday about the civilian climate corps, something, again, that Joe Biden has endorsed. Your plan, again, is bigger. Give us a minute on what that would mean. What's the purpose?
Well, in the 1930s, the most popular program that FDR had was the Civilian Conservation Corps. Now, understand that that was for white young men across the country. So in the 21st century, it has to be multiracial, and it can't just be limited to young men as well. We just have to think big. And what we've got here is an opportunity where we can employ 1.5 million young people in our country, especially, putting them on a pathway to union jobs, giving them the skills which they're going to need, not just for a job, but for a career. And we can employ them doing a lot of the big things that we need to have done in our country, in the same way that the Works Progress Administration and the Civilian Conservation Corps in the 1930s under FDR left a legacy which we still look back at in awe because so much of it is still with us. Well, that's how Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and I see the Civilian Climate Corps. We can accomplish big things if we put the funding in place. But we realize that a vision without funding is an hallucination. So that's why we keep saying it should be big, because ultimately that's the only way we're going to be able to solve this climate crisis.
Speaking of big, you want the Supreme Court to be bigger. 9 seats currently. You filed legislation to bring that to 13. And by the way, Congress does have the power to expand or contract the size of the court. Here's what your good friend Ted Cruz had to say about your proposal.
You didn't see Republicans, when we had control of the Senate, try to rig the game. You didn't see us try to pack the court.
What's your reaction to that, Senator Markey?
Well, you know, I guess it takes one to know one. So, of course, they rigged the game. You know, back in 2016, when there was a vacancy, they wouldn't even give a hearing to Merrick Garland. They said we should not fill a Supreme Court vacancy during a presidential year. And as a result, we had an 8-person Supreme Court for 14 months. But they put that out as a sacrosanct principle that was embedded somehow or other in the Constitution by our founding fathers. But we reached 2020. Unfortunately, the great Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away. And then a week before the election, they confirmed Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court, totally violating all of the principles that they said that they believed in so deeply. So from my perspective, they swiped 2 Supreme Court seats. It's now a 6-3 margin. They're going to be bringing in healthcare bills, civil rights bills, rights to protect women, the environment, and the ability to vote in our country. And with a 6-3 margin, we're going to see judicial carnage in terms of this legacy for 2 generations of progressive laws that are on the books. And the only way to solve it is by using our congressional power. And as you said, that's how it's done, to add 4 more seats. So we create a 7-6 majority that should be in place right now, that 1-vote majority to maintain that progressive history which we've had over the years.
You know, Senator, briefly on this topic, neither Pelosi nor Chuck Schumer have endorsed this. The president is reluctant, at least until his commission comes down. My assessment from a couple hundred miles away is the Republicans play hardball and the Democrats play nice. Is that an unfair characterization of the strategies of the 2 parties?
Well, from my perspective, after they have swiped 2 Supreme Court seats from the Democrats, it's like being down the schoolyard and letting the bully just continue to take your milk money. You know, there's a point in time which you've got to stand up and fight and say, no, we're going to rectify this injustice. And so that's why I thought it was very, very, very important that when I introduced it with Gerald Nadler, the chair of the Judiciary Committee in the House of Representatives, along with the subcommittee chair, Hank Johnson of that committee from Atlanta, and Mondaire Jones, this new incredible, African-American freshman member. So I think there's an interesting bit of recombinant political DNA going on right now. And as each really terrible Supreme Court decision is rendered, we're going to see a movement built across this country to rectify this historic injustice that Ted Cruz and his Republican cronies were all a part of perpetrating on the American people, so that we can rectify that injustice.
Senator, I only have a minute for this, but on a related note, one of my obsessions is the fact that there are more often than not cameras in federal courtrooms, including the Supreme Court. I know that you're a sponsor of the Sunshine in the Courtroom, a co-sponsor of the Sunshine in the Courtroom Act, which would open up federal courtrooms. If people don't know, virtually every state courtroom has a camera. I hope most people watching would agree that had there not been a camera permitted by a judge in Minnesota a couple of weeks ago, we all would have been worse off for it. Could you explain to me briefly why anybody, every one of your colleagues thinks transparency is their middle name? What reason is there to oppose a camera in a federal courtroom, including the Supreme Court, in 2021, Senator?
Well, they're the same arguments that were made when I arrived in Congress and there was no C-SPAN. There was no broadcast of House or Senate deliberations. And all the older members said to me and Al Gore and others who had just arrived, oh, you're going to ruin the deliberative process. You're going to make it more difficult for everyone to be able to work together on the floor. Well, the reality is that the public, when it sees Congress, when it can see how it operates, both on the floor and in committees, it actually makes democracy work better. And my feeling is that we did win, the younger members, to force television onto the floor of the Senate and the House. And we have to win this battle as well, because the judicial system has to have the same kind of disinfectant. That is the sunlight shining in, the public able to see what goes on in the court system. So to a certain extent, that's what's going on right now with the cameras on police officers. Now the public can see what happens on many of these cases. Now we have to take it to the next step, to the courtroom itself, so that we ensure that justice is done from the moment that the incident occurs all the way through the final decision by a judicial process.
Senator, I wish we had more time, but we don't. But I want you to know I'm going to have a hamburger in your honor tonight. So I hope it's enjoyed. Be well.
Well, I might have another ice cream, but
good enough. Senator Markey, it's good to see you. Thanks so much for your time.
Appreciate it.